Speaker, I crave your indulgence and would want to express my thanks to you for allowing the time for me to get into the Parliament. Today, you've been aware that it is that day. And the streets are all jammed with traffic. Took me more than 20 minutes to move from the intersection of Keon Street and the upper portion of College Street onto Church Street and eventually to get here into the Parliament. Of course, one wonders why the budget presentation was moved from Tuesday of this week to Thursday of this week, when, of course, on Friday, the day when there is VAT discount, that people would be very busy shopping, traffic would be difficult. But as someone told me this morning early with a prayer, don't worry, they don't want us to hear you, but we will listen to you, and we shall hear you. And so I am very pleased that we are able, nevertheless, through technology, when maybe people would not normally be listening but shopping, eventually, however, they would get the message of hope, the message of deliverance, the message of again bringing back government to work for the people of St Kitts and Nevis and not for one family or a few families here in our blessed country. With those opening remarks, Mr. Speaker, I want to take us back to last year's presentation when I responded to the budget with great frustration. And yet again, I rise and I participate in this year's debate of the Appropriation Bill 2020 of 2019 with similar frustration. However, this year my sense of frustration is somewhat tempered by the growing excitement that I feel that hope and relief eventually are on the way for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Since, of course, this will be the very last budget presentation that would have been made by this one-term government here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so, Mr. Speaker, this year's budget is not about the advancement of the well-being of our people. It is not about putting forward a comprehensive plan for growth and development. It is about political posturing. It is part of a desperate attempt to negate the very unfavorable view that our people presently hold in relation to the government and its performance after 5 years of assessment. Unfortunately, this budget, it seeks to do so through the usual political gimmicks and not through any substantial change in fiscal and economic policy. Because when I reflect on where we are in terms of the global situation, where we are on the eve of the introduction of this iconic year 2020, if you read through this budget, Mr. Speaker, and I hope you had enough time to go through it, this is empty. Nothing at all that speaks to where we are advancing and what it is that we need to build for our people in this great country as we face the year 2020. Many of the serious defects in previous budgets that create huge risk for our nation have been addressed, or have not been, addressed. Specifically, I have pointed out on numerous occasions that the receipts from citizenship by investment must be treated as a windfall and should not be relied upon to achieve fiscal balance. Yet this year again, notwithstanding the song and the dance of the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, we find that the estimated current account surplus of $203.8 million reported on page 5, Roman numeral 7 of volume 1 of the estimates would turn into a very sizable deficit of $91.2 million. In other words, Mr. Speaker, without the Citizenship by Investment program that was resuscitated by the Labour Party in government, that was restructured and promoted, the so-called unity government would have been short by some $91.2 million of the money that they require to pay teachers, policemen, nurses, civil servants, and other government employees, and to provide everyday conveniences for our people. Similarly, without the Citizenship by Investment program that was brought to life by Labour amidst great opposition, the overall surplus reported on the same page that I mentioned, page 5, 7 of volume 1 of the draft estimates, we would have been very much aware that the overall surplus would have been a whopping deficit of $247.9 million, Mr. Speaker. In other words, the capital budget and all the projects they boast about would have been short of funds had it not been for the foundation and the groundwork that was laid by the Labour Party when it was in government with regard to the revitalization of the Citizenship by Investment program. Mr. Speaker, the general elections are only a few months away now. And the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance has intensified his campaign of deception and disinformation as he desperately tries to present a rosy picture, Mr. Speaker, of the economy when the ordinary citizens of St Kitts and Nevis are living a completely different reality. Much creative accounting permeates the entire budget estimates as part of the political gimmickry and deception agenda of this particular coalition administration. For instance, Mr. Speaker, when you examine the estimated revenues on the Citizenship by Investment on the non-tax revenue on page 5 again, 6 of volume 1 of the draft estimates, it tells a story of political gimmickry. There is no logical pattern or trend detectable in this important revenue head. The actual revenue for 2018, for example, was $417.7 million. But the estimated revenue for 2019, this has been reduced by a massive $187.8 million to some $230 million. And what we are seeing here, Mr. Speaker, is that they are now projecting that the revenues from citizenship by investment for 2019 will in fact be exceeding the estimated amount by $245.7 million to reach $475.7 million. Yet, I want to emphasize that the estimated amount for 2020 is now stated at $295 million, representing a mammoth drop of $180.7 million from the projections for 2019. That is why we are saying that it would appear as if somebody, in doing their creative accounting, recognizing that the figures are not matching and are just creating figures in order to appear to explain what is the true picture, or explain away the true picture that is obvious in the estimates of the revenue here, Mr. Speaker. And I want to make the point that such wild fluctuations and massive deviations between estimated amounts, projected amounts, and actual amounts, they do suggest that the government is playing games with numbers. It appears that the numbers under this head are just balancing accounts or balancing amounts. The government decided on the current and overall surpluses that they would like to report to impress the public. And then they put an amount under this particular head that would allow them to achieve those surpluses. This is not a budget in reality. It is one, again, masked with deception. And we are saying that this cannot hold. In the reality of situations where people are demanding real life situations in order to help themselves and in order to plan their own lives based on what the government says it is going to do. This is creative accounting. This is deceptive accounting. And this will get our country into serious trouble if it is allowed to continue. It makes a mockery of the entire budget process, and it reduces the whole exercise to political gimmickry, which is not acceptable at this level of performance in this parliament. This is one of the reasons why they cannot publish the IMF report, Mr. Speaker. That is why it is still being hidden from the people of St Kitts and Nevis. The IMF would undoubtedly expose such political gimmickry and tell us the true picture, the true position in respect of the performance of the St Kitts and Nevis economy. But they have hidden it from the people. They have hidden it from the parliament. They have hidden it from those who are potential investors. They have hidden it from the other international financial institutions because they believe that by attempting to deceive the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, they will also be able to deceive the international community. But this will not work. I want to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, that the IMF would undoubtedly expose such political gimmickry and tell us the true position in respect of performance of the St. Kitts and Nevis economy. Mr. Speaker, it has been 15 months since the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance has been refusing to release the IMF country surveillance report for St. Kitts and Nevis for 2018. But over this period, we have seen the Prime Minister switch his stance on the matter from one extreme to the other. First, by denying outright that the consultations were complete, and if you no see none, in his own words, none there, to one of open hostility and defiance, where he brazenly refuses to release the report, claiming that, I quote again, If you don't owe the bank, you don't have to take their advice. This is absolute nonsense. That is beside the point. We have a right to receive this report, especially when the exercise has been conducted. And that is why we continue to demand that the IMF report, which has been hidden for 2018, that it be revealed. And it is against the figures in that particular document that we can truly judge the performance of this government, especially as we go through this particular debate. Over this period, as I said, we have seen the reasons given move from one end of the spectrum to the other. I consider the Prime Minister's policy stance towards the IMF to be very highly irresponsible and even dangerous, a dangerous one, given that the IMF has been a long-standing international development partner of which we have been a member since 1984 when we attained independence the year before. Today, I want to use this opportunity to clarify for the listening public some of the myths that the Prime Minister has been trying to peddle about our relationship with the IMF. Firstly, releasing the IMF report has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not we owe the bank. The IMF is an international financial institution that St Kitts and Nevis is a member of. Once we joined the IMF, we agreed to subject our economic and fiscal policy to its scrutiny and the scrutiny of the international community, Mr. Speaker. The IMF's role is to monitor our economy and provide policy advice in order to identify any weakness that is causing or could lead to financial or economic instability. In order to do this, the IMF regularly conducts an Article 4 consultation in all 189 of its members, normally once per year. So whether or not we owe the bank has nothing to do with releasing the report. Secondly, releasing the IMF report has nothing to do with whether or not a country decides to follow the advice that has been provided. It is about open and transparent governance, which allows the public as well as the business community, the investors, the development partners to have access to the information that they need to make important business decisions and investment choices. Yesterday, the Prime Minister himself said how much he has achieved in terms of freedom of information, passing the relevant legislation, passing the Data Processing Act, etc. Yet a report that is critical for our own economic development in terms of advice is being hidden from the people. That is why those are empty words in the budget of yesterday. Empty words. They mean nothing to the people. Absolutely nothing they mean to people in reality. Thirdly, a point which I want to make very, very clear, Mr. Speaker, is that the Prime Minister was not the one to pay off the IMF loan to St Kitts and Nevis. Continues to try to fool the people, or pat himself on his back, beat his chest. I paid off the massive debt that was left there by Labour. That is absolute nonsense. I want us to look at the true figures and the true picture. By 2014, the former Labour administration had already paid off over $40 million of the $84 million of the IMF standby agreement that we entered into in 2011 during the worst effects of the global financial crisis. The Harris administration has only made the final installment of $30 million, which was paid by the end of the fourth quarter of 2015. The money was already there and scheduled to be paid. Whether or not he was in government, it would have been paid, Mr. Speaker. It was there. It is what we left, Mr. Speaker, as a result of our own debt restructuring exercise and the restructuring of the economy. Again, massive deception that is being preached to the people of St Kitts and Nevis. The Harris administration has only made the final installment of $30 million. I did not make this up. This is a figure that was reported by the Ministry of Finance of St Kitts and Nevis itself. Look at the report entitled 2015 to 2017 Medium-Term Debt Management Strategy Update. That is the name of the report, published by the Ministry of Finance in 2016. Their own words, that the debt paid off was structured by the Labour administration, which left office in 2015. Therefore, by refusing to release the IMF report, the Prime Minister is setting a very bad example and a very dangerous precedent, especially given the very precarious economic position that the country now faces, where we have been experiencing anemic growth in comparison to the glory days of 2013 and 2014. Mr. Attorney General, I notice you're paying attention. That is good. Additional reports from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank even revealed that the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis was plunged into recession in 2017. Yet yesterday, in presenting the budget, we heard the Prime Minister say that he's had positive growth consecutively for the last 5 years. Absolute nonsense, Mr. Speaker. Central Bank in 2017 is saying that the country went into a recession because there was negative growth of minus 1.98% of GDP. That again is mass deception on the part of the Prime Minister. But as someone said, he can't help. It is part of his DNA. He can't help. Mr. Speaker, hiding the IMF report is also very dangerous when you consider that under the watch of the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the so-called unity government has contributed nothing to the generation of income, employment, and revenues in this country. And their complete reliance on the citizenship by investment program is very, very risky. That is why we had said with the windfall that we had experienced in 2013, 2014, and which we knew would continue in 2015, that the time had come to put in place, Mr. Speaker, a fund that we would be able to use in days when there is serious rain. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is what we said would have been created, and started to put in place the necessary framework for the Sovereign Wealth Fund to be created. Has never ever been pursued, Mr. Speaker, by this administration. What? Where was it said? Said several times in my own budget of 2015. You understand? Look for it. And the IMF published several reports and studies. Several reports and studies as to how we should advance towards the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Look for it. Mr. Speaker, that is what we said we would have done. Nothing of that has been pursued. Simply using the windfall from the Citizenship by Investment Fund and working it off in all kinds of things. That's not how it should be done. And I take strong issue with the government in that regard, Mr. Speaker. We do not know how long the program will last. In fact, I can give you a series of articles that tell us that this windfall and this citizenship by investment program, especially with what is happening in the program today, where there is no attempt whatsoever to stimulate economic activity by way of construction, nothing of that kind is taking place. We are now hearing selling shares $25,000 US, $30,000 US. That can't build anything in this country. And that is why the real estate option has gone to naught here in St. Kitts and Nevis. That is why I'm saying, with the risk that has been presented as a result of what is happening today, we do not know how much longer this CIP will be functional here in St. Kitts and Nevis and in the rest of the Caribbean. Yet, the Sovereign Wealth Fund that should have been created for a rainy day has not at all been pursued, abandoned completely by this government. Mr. Speaker, every day we hear of new scandals affecting the program, and the patience and tolerance of the international community are being stretched to the limit. At the same time, global warming and climate change create increased risk of natural disasters, and we can no longer count on significant help from the international community in the event of crisis because the government refuses to publish the report of the IMF. The IMF will not come to our rescue. The World Bank will not come to our rescue. The European Development Fund or the European Commission, they will not come to our rescue. And even our own regional institution, the CDB, I am sure, would be hesitant because there is no reliable information from an international financial institution like the IMF that they can rely upon if they were to assess what is the true picture in the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis. Mr. Speaker, this is the report that every country, donor, and lender examines to decide on the level of resources that they would provide to a country because it tells a story of how well or how poorly a government is using the resources available to it. In fact, one of the important reasons, I've said it before and I'll repeat it here, that we went to the IMF, you know why? We knew that we had restructured our economy. We were on our way to recovery. We had a debt restructuring program that was first class, approved by the international financial institutions. But you know what was the problem? The European Commission had earmarked $30 million to assist in the transitioning of the economy from sugar agriculture to services. And they keep saying to us, we want to see an examination of the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis by a reputable international financial institution. And in order for us to actually receive that $30 million, because they were questioning our absorptive capacity. So in order for us to be able to access, we had to go to the IMF for that specific purpose, Mr. Speaker, because the absorptive capacity was not strictly understood, laid out, approved by those who were to release our money. I say our money because it was money that was pledged to us in the transitioning of the economy. But of course, they said, these are European funds. The European citizen who may be suffering himself would like to know that we, on advancing this money from the European Union, would be putting it to its best use. And we need to see an institution like the IMF become involved in whatever exercise you are pursuing in the restructuring of your economy. So again, I make the point, we need to recognize that by not making available the IMF report, and worse yet, to bar the IMF from coming in 2019 to assess the economy is even worse, Mr. Speaker. Barring the IMF from coming in to assess the economy in 2019 is worse, Mr. Speaker.
There has been no barring of the IMF.
Are they here? Did they come?
No barring.
This is the end of the year.
Does that mean they're barred, Mr. Speaker?
You barred them?
Mr. Speaker, there is no barring of the IMF. The IMF has indicated when they would wish to come, and we expect that the IMF will come on those due dates. But it is misleading,
In 2019.
and it is improper that the member for number 6 should proceed to make such an untruthful statement, Mr. Speaker. He's calling and impugning the good name and character of the officials in the ministry, the financial secretary and no deputy, who would be one who would make these arrangements with the IMF. There is no truth whatsoever to that.
I am not in any way undermining the confidence that I have.
That is what you are doing.
In the official, I speak of the confidence I have in the Minister of Finance, not the ministry officials. Don't let us get it wrong. I have total respect and regard for those who are in the Ministry of Finance. It is the Minister of Finance who is deceptive in what he's expressing here in the budget for 2019. You can't tell me what I can say. You had your say, you can't tell me what to say. Anyway, let me continue. I say, Mr. Speaker, to ask the electorate to go to the polls without knowing the contents of this important report is an attempt to blindfold them. That is what they're trying to do. Hoodwink them as they discharge the very important obligation of electing a new government. Thank God our people, they are intelligent and they are vigilant and they understand exactly what is happening here in this country, Mr. Speaker. The SIDF is now practically defunct and can no longer provide the economic buffer in the unfortunate instance of a natural disaster. That is what I'm talking about. Those proceeds should have been put into a proper fund, a sovereign wealth fund. For the time of we were doing it. You understand? We were at the point of doing that. And what I'm saying is that if there is a natural disaster, only God knows what will happen to us here in St Kitts and Nevis. Mr. Speaker, I am making the point again. The SIDF is now practically defunct and can no longer provide the economic buffer in the unfortunate instance of a natural disaster or other deleterious exogenous economic shock, such as the great global recession that brought the economic and financial system of the world to its knees back in 2008. The dream once entertained by the former Labour administration of starting a sovereign wealth fund as an emergency fund on which we can rely in times of crisis may never become a reality now, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, the time may once again present itself that St. Kitts and Nevis may need to call upon its friends in the IMF for assistance. How would this be possible when our government has taken such a hostile and disrespectful stance towards it and has cast aspersions as to the expertise of its professionals and the quality of their advice? Mr. Speaker, my grandmother used to say, never dam the bridge you cross, because you don't know when you might have to return over it. And this is why I say, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister of Finance, his words with the IMF, they are highly irresponsible and even juvenile, Mr. Speaker, juvenile behavior on the part of the Prime Minister in this regard.
And the member for number 6 ought to know that he should extend courtesy when a member rises on a point of order. It is that behavior that has caused him to be where he are now in the Parliament. And I need...
Let me say this now. Let me say this now. Because as usual, I try my best to be very observant once I'm presiding. Yesterday, during the presentation by the Honorable Minister of Finance, there were in fact some cross-talk. I would agree and concede it was not to the level that it is now heading. I would accept that. There was talk, and I deliberately sat back, and now we are having a rebuttal or the presentation from the leader of the opposition. And once a point of order is asked for, please let us hear the point of order, and I will rule on it. Honourable member for number 7.
Again, the rules will prevent the member from number 6 from the deliberate mischievous statement in which he says that we have developed an antagonistic relationship with the IMF. For the record, Mr. Speaker, opinion versus facts, you're entitled to your opinion, but not to the facts. The facts are independent of you. And the facts would be that the relationship between the IMF and St Kitts and Nevis are the best ever. The best ever because we have repaid the IMF the $117 million left by the member. The IMF has it recently, only this year, on 2 occasions, the IMF invited me to Washington, D.C. to lead a panel to speak upon issues that are of importance to them. The IMF also, if you were to follow the illogic opposite, the IMF also invited me just last month or 2 months ago to speak on a panel in Barbados. So that can't be an antagonistic relationship, Mr. Speaker. Please let me finish.
As per usual, the chair will rule on points of order. The chair is the sole judge of that. Honourable member, thank you.
I want to end by just correcting the mischievous statement that there is an antagonist relationship. We have excellent relations. We have always maintained that. And I have pointed to at least 2 occasions in the last 3 months in which I was the IMF special guest.
Thank you.
And certainly if the IMF has a report, it is their report.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable
Not
member.
our report.
Mr. Speaker, this outrage let me go back and make it very clear what I'm saying. It is my understanding that the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance has not consented to allow. He said that he has allowed them to come. But we are now in the closing days of the year. So when are they going to come? When are they going to come? Mr. Speaker, I want to make that clear. Therefore, not only has the Prime Minister refused to release the 2018 IMF report, but there will be no report available for 2019. Not only has he refused to publish the 2018 report, but there will be no report for 2019, Mr. Speaker. That is the point I want to make, and it has been made. This is an outrage, Mr. Speaker. It begs the question of what exactly is the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance hiding? What is he hiding? That is the question that people out there are asking. What is it that he's hiding? Based on the red flags raised in both the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Mr. Speaker, the country report of 2018, and the Caribbean Development Bank's country review report of 2018. Could it have something to do with the high ratio of non-performing loans that the Central Bank and the CDB have warned are putting the solvency of our domestic commercial banks at risk? Is it that? Mr. Speaker, according to the CDB 2018 report, and I quote here, the domestic banking system remains under pressure from worsening asset quality. Yes. The ratio of non-performing loans to gross loans increased from 16.5% in September 2017 to 24.9% in September of 2018, end of quote. We are all aware that 25% We are all aware that 25% is far above the international standard of keeping the ratio of non-performing loans to gross loans in our domestic commercial banks under 5%. What is ours? 24.9%, Mr. Speaker. 24.9%, Mr. Speaker. And so I make it clear again, what is it that is being hidden by not revealing the contents of the IMF report? Is this the reason why the Prime Minister is hiding the report? Is it because the IMF issued more detailed warnings about the high risk being posed to these banks, which include our national bank and our own development bank, Mr. Speaker? After almost 5 budget cycles, the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance finally saw it fit to lay the actuarial report for the Social Security Board and the audited financial statements for the Development Bank in the House on December the 5th. A comprehensive review of this report reveals some alarming trends, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the actuarial report for the Social Security Board at page 2, paragraph 2, reveals that for the first time,
when there are a number of members on the government bench speaking at the same time, it clearly then makes it difficult even for me to hear. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for attempting to protect me. Mr. Speaker, the actuarial report for the Social Security Board at page 2, paragraph 2, Mr. Speaker, it reveals that for the first time in the history of the Social Security Board, listen to this, contribution income is less than total expenditure in 2017. It reveals that for the first time, Mr. Speaker, for the first time in the history of the Social Security Board, contribution income is less than total expenditure in 2017. It projects also on page 3 of the report, paragraph 3, that total expenditure will exceed total income. Listen to this. Total expenditure will exceed total income, that is contribution income plus investment income, between 2022 and 2026. And it doesn't stop there, Mr. Speaker. Look more closely as you go into the report. Look at page 8, table 1.1. It says that investment income has decreased significantly from $56.6 million in 2015 to $48.7 million, Mr. Speaker, in 2017. Mr. Speaker, these are very, very worrying trends that we are seeing in the Social Security. So worrying that it is very difficult it is a very difficult decision for me to have to expose them here in Parliament, given the highly sensitive nature of this information. But, Mr. Speaker, the point must be made that this coalition have not been good stewards of our domestic financial institutions. Are these the reasons why the IMF report is being hidden from the people of St Kitts and Nevis? Are these the reasons? Because the trend in the Social Security scheme appears to be one of collapsing, Mr. Speaker. Is that the trend? And is that the reason why we are not seeing the report from the IMF, Mr. Speaker? Similarly, we see disturbing trends taking place at the Development Bank of St Kitts and Nevis. Look at page 36, Mr. Speaker. Under the headline, Loans and Advances to Customers, note 7 in particular, that there has been a significant development bank that was laid on the table. Yes. that there has been a significant increase in bad loans. Allowance for impairment loss increased by $10 million between 2016 and 2017, from $35.5 million in 2016 to $45.9 million in 2017. Our development bank, the People's Bank, the taxpayers' money bank, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, such trends do not bode well for a safer or more secure future for our domestic financial institutions, as the Prime Minister would like us to believe. That is why we are saying, as we go into 2020, what is there for us and the young people of St Kitts and Nevis? What is there for the elderly people, Mr. Speaker? What is there for the small entrepreneurs who are trying their best to stay afloat, Mr. Speaker? What is there when we see a trend like this, as I've just outlined? Mr. Speaker, it was just this past Monday that the St Kitts and Nevis Anguilla National Bank held its annual shareholders meeting and released its annual audited report for 2019, which reveals some very disturbing trends as well. I am talking about disturbing trends going into 2020. That is what I'm talking about. Firstly, this is the third year running from 2017 to 2019 that the accounts of the National Bank have been qualified by its auditors. The 2017 accounts were qualified. The 2018 accounts, they were qualified as well, Mr. Speaker. And the 2019 accounts were qualified as well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, never before in the 48-year history of the bank have its accounts been qualified as a result of the, and I quote here, impairment of the financial assets, Mr. Speaker. That's why, Mr. Speaker, the financial assets of the National Bank. This is a first for the institution in almost 50 years. 50 years. Mr. Speaker, the directors have refused to write off large non-performing loans. In the past, the Labour administration has had to write off large loans as well. And in so doing, we have still been able to turn a profit. But these directors did not, Mr. Speaker, because the bank's accounts would have shown a loss, Mr. Speaker, for the first time in the history of the bank. I don't want to say much more about this because I don't want to undermine our own citizens' confidence in this bank. But, Mr. Speaker, these are the facts that have been revealed, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
What exactly?
I am making reference to the statement.
What statement?
Honourable Member.
Not you.
What statement?
Honourable
What
Member.
statement?
Honourable Number 6, yes. Yes.
Of course.
Mr. Speaker, the member for number 6 knows, and while he makes reference to the audit report, he's been selective because he wants to be mischievous. The audit report specifies the rationale for the qualification. It relates to a loan administered under his watch to a bank in Antigua of over $30 million. $30 million under his watch.
Mr. Speaker, he has his time to wrap up.
He gave that
You can't
loan
take
to
up my time like that.
And that is what creating the problem now. That is what creating the problem.
You can't take it now. You can't take it.
Maybe it's an appropriate time for me to say that maybe I should adopt a policy now, going forward, that in terms of these points of orders that are raised, we're going to have to be a little more specific. Otherwise, the debate could go on and on and on and on. And that is why I put the question just now with respect to what was said specifically by the presenter, what was the point of order being raised. So let us, when we are rising on points of order, to be very specific as to what the presenter would have said that is in breach of the rules, or that is bringing the House into disrepute. Please.
Mr. Speaker, I continue. Never before in the 48-year history of the National Bank have its accounts been qualified as a result of, and I quote here from the report, impairment of financial assets, end of quotes, of the National Bank. And this is the first for the institution in almost 50 years. You understand? 50 years, Mr. Speaker. The directors, they have refused, Mr. Speaker, to write off large non-performing loans. But in the past, the Labour administration has had to write off large loans as well, and in doing so have still been able to turn a profit. But these directors did not, Mr. Speaker, because the bank's accounts would have shown a loss, Mr. Speaker, for the first time in the history of the bank, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, with all the talk of big profits for 2019, if you were to do a closer examination of the financial statements of the National Bank, they would reveal that the big profits reported are only as a result of creative accounting. Yes, it is again. The net profits, Mr. Speaker, before tax decreased by over $20 million compared with 2018. The only reason why the net profits appears to have increased to $52 million is that the bank paid less taxes in 2019 than in 2018. Mr. Speaker, in fact, Mr. Speaker, further examination shows that the Harris administration has been a very poor steward of the National Bank, since the bank's total assets have not increased at all since 2014, Mr. Speaker. When the new administration took office back in 2015, the National Bank's total assets was $3.6 billion. Today, in 2019, the National Bank's total assets is still $3.6 billion EC, Mr. Speaker. No expansion has taken place under this new administration. Yet, Mr. Speaker, we've heard of excessive increases in fees for directors. And that, Mr. Speaker, is troubling to those who are working in the bank, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, despite the poor stewardship, the directors, chairman of the National Bank requested and approved an increase in their fees. The chairman requested and received an increase in his fees from $3,000 per month, Mr. Speaker, to $6,500. 117% increase, Mr. Speaker. And yet this is a stipend. The ordinary directors requested and received an increase in their fees from $2,000 to $5,000, an increase of 150%, Mr. Speaker. Yet the assets of the bank have not grown. Mr. Speaker, this is excessive and it is unjustified. In the past, around 2008, the National Bank's directors and chairman received an increase when they had grown the bank's assets to over $2 billion. And so in 2008, an increase was in fact permitted. They grew the bank to $2 billion. They, for 5 years, have not grown the bank at all, yet they are taking increases of 150% and 170%. Yet they say these are just, what they call them? Stipends. Stipends. Mr. Speaker, this is unjustified. The chairman has tried to justify the increase for himself and the bank's directors by claiming that the bank's assets increased from $2 billion in 2008 to $3.6 billion today. But for the 5 years, they have not grown it. They have not grown it. Have not grown it at all. So you're going back to 2008, it increased from $2 billion to what it is now. And you are now taking an increase? Oh my God, man. A closer examination, Mr. Speaker, of the reports over the years would show that the 60% increase in the assets from $2 billion to $3.6 billion took place in 2014, well before the new administration and well before the new board members took their positions, and the bank assets have not expanded 1 cent since. Yet, 150% increase and 117% increase in fees. The poor civil servants. What about them? The policemen. What about them? What about no increase for them? What about the civil servants, the teachers? What about the nurses? No increase for them. But 150% increase and 117% increase, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker. Are we going to go into 2020 like this? The people of St Kitts and Nevis want the same government to take them into 2020 with this kind of personal and selfish behavior? That is what I ask, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in addition to this, Mr. Speaker, there is no justification for the increase in the fees for these part-time positions, for the directors and chairmen, especially since they have been such poor stewards. Poor stewards! How can you compensate people who are doing bad? How can that happen? How could you reward people like that? Mr. Speaker, the chairman and the directors have insisted on an increase when staff wages generally for the bank's employees have not increased from 2015. What about the staff? Salaries and wages, what about they increasing? After all, the cost of living has gone up for them as well. What about them, Mr. Speaker? When you look at the actual report for Social Security, it is telling us that less than 6% of the workforce in St. Kitts and Nevis make over $6,500 per month. Listen to this. Less than 6% of the workforce. And this is the full salary for a man who is part-time. And we're going to accept that going into 2020? We're going to accept that going into 2020? 6% of the workforce in St. Kitts and Nevis make over $6,500 per month. And part-time people getting this, Mr. Speaker. And the workers in the bank, nothing for them. After all, Mr. Speaker, we want to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, that 94% of what the workforce of St. Kitts and Nevis is presently making is an average of $3,000 per month. 94% of the workforce in this country, on average, making $3,000 per month. And these heartless people can talk about they want to take 150% and 117% increase. That is why we are saying in the next gen SKN administration, it will be about the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. It will be about the St. Kitts and Nevis people. Not ministers of government and their cronies and friends. Not nepotistic people, Mr. Speaker. It will be about the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. The old lady The young man who is trying desperately to find a job after he has finished his secondary education and his CFBC education. Those are the people it will be for, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the question therefore still stands. Is the creeping crisis taking place at our National Bank, our Development Bank, our Social Security Fund part of the reason why the Prime Minister refuses to release the IMF report? Is it because of these disturbing trends, which might have been condemned by the IMF, and he doesn't want people to see?
Exactly that.
Mr. Speaker, our citizens also need to know how the funds raised for the Citizenship by Investment Program have been accounted for. We have heard of large sums of money that were raised to the so-called Hurricane Relief Fund that was opened in October 2017 and closed 1 year later and then carried over into Sustainable Growth Fund. We still don't know anything about these funds. A major problem arising from the arbitrariness of the amounts included under the Citizenship by Investment head is that we do not know the true picture in respect of receipts from the Citizenship by Investment. There has been no proper accounting or auditing in respect of the Hurricane Relief Fund and the Sustainable Growth Fund up to now, 2017. This was launched. Nothing to date has been provided, Mr. Speaker. Moreover, no audited accounts have been published by the SIDF since 2016, when in the past they were produced annually, Mr. Speaker. We must therefore ask the question, where the money gone? The IMF knows where it has gone. They have it in their report, but we can't see the report, Mr. Speaker. We cannot continue like this as a nation. If we do not take action urgently, such recklessness would haunt us in the future. We cannot go into 2020 like this, Mr. Speaker. The time has come for a change, a meaningful change, Mr. Speaker, as we advance our country forward, Mr. Speaker. The people of St Kitts and Nevis need a full accounting of how these funds are being used. To date, there is still no transparency. There is no accountability. There is no assurance that the country has been the beneficiary of the resources attracted to these funds. The aggregated figure that appears in the consolidated fund, it is not enough. We want more. We demand more accountability, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this coalition administration cannot claim that it is serious about good governance if it is not serious about transparency and openness. Transparency is one of the most important principles of good governance. It is based on the belief that citizens should be able to scrutinize, they should be able to inspect the work of the public administration bodies and should be able to monitor the decision-making process, Mr. Speaker. Transparency acknowledges the right of citizens to access information, to hold the government accountable, and to prevent corruption and nepotism in particular, Mr. Speaker. This has been the most opaque government in the history of independent St Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has often referred to the World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index that was released back in 2019, early in 2019. He likes to mention that St Kitts and Nevis ranks at 30 out of 129 countries, and he's proud of that. But what the Prime Minister fails to mention is that St Kitts and Nevis has fallen by 2 positions in 2019, down from 28 position back in 2017, Mr. Speaker. What the Prime Minister fails to mention, Mr. Speaker, is that the WJP report warns against the negative slide toward weaker rule of law. Sorry.
Honourable members, there are times I am finding it difficult to hear what the Honorable Presenter is saying. It is unfortunate. Continue, Honorable Member.
I was saying, Mr. Speaker, that what the Prime Minister failed to mention when he makes reference time and time again about the WJP report is that the report warns against, and I quote here, the negative slide toward weaker rule of law. End of quote. And it warns against checks on the government powers here in St Kitts and Nevis. And its executive director has said that this is deeply, quote, deeply concerning. So with all this talk about good governance and all kind of things, the rule of law is what is being questioned and identified by those who formulated the same report that he is referring to.
Corruption and oppression of people. Corruption and oppression of people.
Mr. Speaker, in my view, what was most notable about the report is that not only has St. Kitts and Nevis fallen by 2 positions from 28 to 30, but also that in the area of constraints on government powers, the report noted declines in the following areas. 1, sanctions for official misconduct. Sanctions for official misconduct. Number 2, independent auditing. Number 3, limits by legislature. 4, right to information. 5, publicized laws and government data. 6, due process of law. Freedom of expression, right to privacy, and freedom of association. Mr. Speaker, that is why, Mr. Speaker, a young man who was a police officer named Lennox Hodge, arrested in his uniform, trial not taking place after 12 months. Half pay, Mr. Speaker. Half pay, Mr. Speaker.
I was hoping that I would not have to make any interventions with regard to certain rulings I've made in this Honorable House before. Honorable Senator opposite, you said Donna Harris. Who are you referring to? Who is that person, may I ask?
Donna Harris?
Could you rise, please?
There's several persons up.
I am at, Honorable Member, could you rise, please?
Speaker.
Could you rise? I'm addressing you, could you rise? The Honorable Mover is making his presentation. From your sitting position, you mentioned the name Donna Harris. Who is that person?
Mr. Speaker, I'm a member of this parliament. I speak just like the Prime Minister speaks. He calls people's names, I call people's names.
Who is Donna Harris?
Anybody whose name is Donna Harris, I'm referring to them. Anybody whose name is Donna Harris, I'm referring to them.
You're being completely dishonest.
I'm being dishonest?
You're being completely
I am being dishonest?
Dad, sit down. It's okay.
Honorable, I'm not done yet, Honorable Presenter. I'm not done yet. I started by saying I was hoping it would not come to this. But a member of this House has raised the name of a magistrate in this country, Donna Harris, and the way, not you, the Honorable Senator opposite, and the way he said it, and when he said it, the only interpretation I can put to that, he's referring to Magistrate Donna Harris. Honorable members, I am speaking, and in fact, I am making a ruling with respect to that matter. I have interpreted what the Senator opposite said as being referring to a magistrate in this country, a Donna Harris. My ruling on that matter has been clear, concise. Honorable member, I would indicate when my ruling is completed. Any any semblance of an interruption while I'm speaking on that matter, I will deal with it. You made reference to Donna Harris. I have interpreted it to mean or to be referring to a magistrate in this country. Reference to magistrates and judges and the director of prosecution, public prosecution, and the registrar of High Court under my watch while I'm presiding is off limits. There shall be no references or in any derogatory way to such persons holding such offices. The only time I would allow any mention to those persons, the only time I would allow them to be brought into any debate in this National Assembly is via a substantive motion. That is my ruling. For the rest of my time here in this chair, any other references to any of those four persons or four category of persons, magistrates, the director of public prosecution, the registrar of the High Court, and the judges of our courts of this land, I will consider it to be completely out of order and I will deal with it accordingly. And again, I end by saying, I would be the sole judge of whether or not those persons and the positions they hold are brought into disrepute by members of this House. That is my ruling. Honourable Member for number 6, continue. Don't tell me you Honourable Member for Honourable Member Senator, remember you were named in this House for laughing once I'd given a decision. I've just made a ruling. It seems to me like you were sniggering at the end of the ruling.
What is it? What?
Honourable Member for number 6, I'm addressing the senator opposite. Well, I've begun to speak again. So if I begin to speak again, Honourable Member for number 6, we've been through this thing over and over and over again. I have ruled on that matter, and subsequent to that, there was a reaction from the member opposite, and I responded to that reaction. And I take it as a warning, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for number 6, continue.
Mr. Speaker, I was looking, that's 10 minutes gone, you know. 10 minutes.
Honourable Member for number 6, that too is unnecessary. It is unnecessary.
I know I can't rely on you. I know I can't rely on you.
That is why it's unnecessary. That comment is unnecessary.
Very good. I know I can't rely on you. Oh my God. Mr. Speaker, this is very interesting, eh? Very interesting. Yesterday, people presented 2.5 hours, no interruptions, but now I'm interrupted all the time. Why? They can't take it. They can't take the message to the people. You understand? This is what is happening.
I hope you don't have not considered my intervention and interruption.
No, Mr. Speaker,
oh, okay.
You're right, of course.
Oh,
okay. Mr. Speaker, I was saying that the Prime Minister continues to make reference to the WJP report, and he pats himself on his back, and he pats himself on his chest, chicken chest, and he says all manner of things, how glorious and good it is. But Mr. Speaker, what he has not said to our people is that the very report warned him against a number of things in his government. That is what he has refused to say to the people. And I want to pick up them again, Mr. Speaker. He was warned, Mr. Speaker, that there were concerns with regard to areas of constraints on government powers. And the report noted declines in the following areas. 1, sanctions for official misconduct. 2, independent auditing. 3, limits by legislature. 4, right to information. 5, publicized laws and government data. 6, due process of law. 7, freedom of expression. 8, right to privacy and freedom of association. And then I was speaking about how Lennox Hodge was abused because of government powers, Mr. Speaker. I was making mention of a young man, 17 years in the police force, made to sleep on a hard bench in the police station, in uniform, refused to be given bail, marched down to the magistrate court the next morning, put on leave, Mr. Speaker, 12 months before his case is heard. And then, when the case is heard, 12 months after, the magistrate says there is really no evidence to support the charges against you. I mean, this is the kind of nonsense that we are talking about. Abuse of power. And we understand that the instruction came from the office of the Prime Minister. That is what we understand, Mr. Speaker.
That is crossed the line.
Understand?
That is crossed, and he has to withdraw it.
Yes.
That is impugning. That
Withdraw
is
what?
interference in
What?
the judiciary.
What do?
But
that is what I'm saying.
That has nothing to do with the executive. Mr.
Eh?
Speaker.
What is the point of order here? What is the point of order here, Mr. Speaker? Let me make my presentation. Nobody disturbed you yesterday.
The office of the Prime Minister.
Nobody disturbed you yesterday.
That is going beyond the pale. That is a judicial process.
You understand?
A man goes before a magistrate. That is judicial.
How did he get there? How did he get there? How did he get there?
You cause him to drive and break the law. You.
I remember, I am in agreement with the mover of the point of order that two things. The directive came from the office of the Prime Minister, and secondly, it's a judicial matter. The two things, it's in conflict. It is speaking against the judiciary. Kindly withdraw it. That the office of the Prime Minister, gave directions in a judicial matter.
I praise the judiciary for performing its role in finding him not guilty. I praise them, Mr. Speaker. Justice would have been done, Mr. Speaker.
My understanding of what you said is that the directive came from the office of the Prime Minister.
You can't know what you're saying here.
No, he said, the young man, he understood that, he told me that. That is what he understood. That is what he was told.
And remember, I would advise you not to do that.
Okay, I ain't nobody again. But the point is that, Mr. Speaker, there is concern about the interference, Mr. Speaker. Interference in certain matters. Commissioner Quealy put in exile all the way in Morocco, simply because he did, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, again, those kind
What is
of
it you're standing up about? What is it you're standing up about?
Please. Quealy has
Why are you standing up?
by his own wish. You're being mischievous. Quealy has no confidence in
Mr.
you.
Speaker,
You turned down
exile
Quealy.
in Morocco because somebody did not want him there in the high command when the elections are called. That's the reason, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, I made note of the words of the Prime Minister himself. In reference to that, he said, now we have the people we wanted. Something of that kind. That is what you said? That is what you said? No, but I'm going to find it. And I'm going to come back to it, Mr. Speaker. But the point I'm making is that there is concern about the abuse of power, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to move on. Because you see, the government has implemented 2 social programs funded by the CBI. The Poverty Alleviation Program and the Roof Repair Program. Both of which have been plagued by corruption by the government's own admission. And yet there is still no proper accounting for these programs. That is what the Justice Report was talking about. That is what they was referring to. There is lack of accountability and lack of transparency. Publicized laws and government data. There's a dearth of that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there has been no transparency as regards the Poverty Alleviation Program. There is no way to verify the information that the Prime Minister has been providing about how much money has been disbursed and the distribution of the people who have benefited. None whatsoever. He's just talking. From inception, the PAP has been shrouded in secrecy, and has been completely administered by the Office of the Prime Minister, and not the Ministry of Social Services, which is the appropriate line ministry, Mr. Speaker. The last country poverty assessment that was conducted with the help of the Caribbean Development Bank, the OECS and the World Bank was completed in 2007-2008. And since May of 2018, the government announced the launch of a new poverty assessment process. But to date, there has been no confirmation that this new poverty assessment report has been completed. So on what empirical basis is the poverty alleviation program being administered? Where's the data? Where's the empirical data? This is what we're saying, Mr. Speaker. It can't be just whim and fancy out of the Office of the Prime Minister. It can't be that. This is public funds. Public funds, Mr. Speaker. This lack of transparency in the program can create the reasonable perception that the program is a political gimmick. What are the criteria, Mr. Speaker, by which persons are being selected? Based on what data? Where are the disaggregated figures that would break down how many people, constituency by constituency or village by village, have been provided with this assistance? Where is it? We are people here elected by the people. We should know. We have the right to know. Mr. Speaker, there have been many reports that some persons who were approved when the program was launched have now been removed from the program. And there are so many persons who have received the $500 handout who make a lot more than $3,000 individually, and some of them are living abroad, Mr. Speaker, living abroad and still getting it. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister recently announced that a total of some $13.6 million has been disbursed to approximately 4,000 households on St. Kitts alone as of June 2019. He has made the people, 4,000 people are poorer than when he got into power. 4,000 people are poorer today. His own admission, Mr. Speaker, so that he has to give them handouts of $500. The Prime Minister recently announced $13.6 million. The PAP is also a program that the government has declared as being funded under the Sustainable Growth Fund. If this is so, and only $13.6 million has been spent, how will the rest of the money in the SGF be used? Tell us. This is the Parliament. We need to know. How does the government plan to sustain the program over time? We need to know as well. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, we don't even know how much money in the Sustainable Growth Fund. How will we know how long the PAP will last? If we don't know how much money is in the fund, there is no way of verifying anything. They said that they're sharing it with Nevis. Is Nevis getting its adequate share? How much? How much, Mr. Speaker? That is the question. Where's Nevis, man? Where is he? He's not here. How much, Mr. Speaker, is Nevis getting? Is Nevis getting its fair share? Is it 7%, 10%, 20%, 25%? What is the amount that Nevis is getting, Mr. Speaker? Huh? What? Mr. Speaker, furthermore, the Prime Minister has admitted that 4,000 households have received assistance from the PAP. Our last country poverty assessment that was conducted by the CDB in 2007, 2008, put the number of households compared, Mr. Speaker, to then to now, 2.4 persons on the 26, on St. Kitts, at 11,927 persons. And based on this figure, the poverty rate was set at 14.8% for St. Kitts. Using this same figure, it means that if 4,000 persons are receiving the assistance, this means that our poverty rate of St. Kitts has increased under this administration to 33.5%. 5%, Mr. Speaker. No, I haven't asked you. It was set at 14.8 back in 2000. It was 33.5%. You keep that in your head and you come back and respond. What does this say about the Prime Minister when he continues to boast that something good is happening in St. Kitts and that the people across the Federation are better off than they have ever been? The Prime Minister is contradicting himself. But this is what happens when we have a Prime Minister whose only source of information he's allowed to just make up his own figures. That is what is happening, Mr. Speaker. This is why we in the parliamentary opposition insist on the release of the IMF report. Did it offer any critique or warning about the poverty alleviation program? We would want to know. Did it make any comment about the roof repair program? We would want to know, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I believe that when we speak about the situation in Nevis, again I ask, is Nevis getting its good share? Just recently, the entire country was very shocked to hear the Prime Minister accuse the Nevis Island administration of squandering over $200 million in extra budgetary support that it has received from the federal government over the last 4.5 years. You didn't say it? No? After perusing the budget estimates for 2020, there is still no clear indication about how much money is being allocated to the NIA from the CBI program and by what formula is it being allocated. Mr. Speaker, we would have also heard about the Pay for Peace initiative that has replaced any comprehensive, holistic national strategy to effectively fight violent crime, not just the gun-related ones. This is yet another government program where there is no transparency whatsoever. Over $100 million have been spent on law enforcement, and we cannot account for precisely how it is being used. Mr. Speaker, we understand that for the last few months, almost a year, $5 million every month is being taken from the development bank to finance this particular program, Pay for Peace. Mr. Speaker, we need to have real figures presented to us. $5 million passing through the hands of Len Harris in the development banks every single month for the Pay for Peace program.
Mr. Speaker, there is no such arrangement, and the member for number 6 ought to withdraw that statement that $5 million passes to Len. But you can't come as a serious person. Well, I am telling you it's not so, Mr. Speaker. And he can't come here with hearsay, deliberate, concocted of his own imagination to mislead the people and improve the character of persons who are not here. He can't. He can't say that.
Honorable members, member for number 6, you have stated something very specifically at a certain amount. Honorable members, please. The presenter has stated that there's a certain amount being withdrawn for a particular program. The Honorable Minister of Finance has risen on a point of order and he says that is not so. Let us move on, please.
Okay, let's move on. Mr. Speaker, we need to know how much money. Mr. Speaker, this is really ridiculous now. What is the point of order?
Mr. Speaker, in this chamber, laid on the table was the accounts of the development bank.
Yes.
And the accounts of the Development Bank have been made to the public. Any such accusation against the Development Bank has to be represented in the accounts of the financials of the Development Bank. He therefore, Mr. Speaker, ought properly to refer to the bank's accounts to substantiate what he's saying. Can't just make up figures like that.
Can't come with a hearsay.
You don't know it's stable.
Report is from 2017.
You don't know it's stable.
What is it? Exactly. So what is he talking about? How could I refer to that report when it is before the program started? You sleeping, you just wake up? Huh? Seems as though you just woke up. Go back to sleep. Mr. Speaker, again I said, Prime Minister said it is not $5 million every month. How much is it? How much is it is what we ask. He has not said in the report. Look here, Mr. Speaker. I've read it. I've read this document. Paragraph 70 and 71. No mention of money. How much is it? That is what we are asking. How much is it? We have a right to know. The money in Development Bank belongs to the taxpayers of St Kitts and Nevis. You know how many young children out there can't get a proper meal at nights to go to sleep? Do we know? How many in the hospitals can't get medicine and are dying as a result of that? We need to know the figures, Mr. Speaker. That is what I'm saying. $5 million every month passing through the hands of the CEO, who is the brother of the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, and Minister of National Security. And his campaign manager, he said here in this parliament. He said in this parliament.
You cannot be allowed to proceed down that path.
What path? Tell me what path. What path?
The old Douglas path. That is what it is. That is what it is. The old Douglas path. That is the best description.
Honorable member for number 6, you have just stated words to the effect that $5 million is passing through the hands of the CEO, which is the brother of the Prime Minister, when a while ago the Honorable Minister of Finance stated that the amount is not so. Honorable member for number 6. Honorable, no, hold on. Well, honorable member, you can't, please, don't interrupt me, because I was going to direct you to withdraw it. So don't preempt me, It doesn't work like that. You said you were withdrawing it because you probably thought that's where it was heading. No, don't preempt me and don't interrupt me. I'm going to be very specific and handle things very in a concise way in here, so that there are no doubts at the end of the day. So we had the issue of the $5 million mentioned. The Minister of Finance refuted that.
He has to say what it is.
I indicated we'll move on. And so now we have put it in a different context to say Honorable member, please, you have said that $5 million is now passing through the hands of the CEO, which is the brother. Kindly withdraw that statement.
I withdraw the $5 million because you have ruled it earlier that we should not go back to that. But whatever it is about, it's passing through the hands of the CEO of the bank, who is Mr. Speaker.
No money
Mr. Speaker,
any functionary of a bank.
passing through your hands is an expression. You know what that expression means?
That doesn't happen. What?
You know what the expression means? He's in charge, he's the CEO.
No, Mr.
So when I say pass through, I don't mean that he physically count out the millions of dollars. I don't say that.
You can't be saying these things. It's being deliberate. Going back to being the same hole.
Mr. Speaker, let's move on. I'm saying, Mr. Speaker,
that is what the public class
Mr. Speaker, he says here, Mr. Speaker, he says here, not my words, he said the resulting alternative lifestyle pathway project, which is funded by the government and executed through the agency of the Development Bank. of St Kitts and Nevis. But who is the CEO? Who is the CEO of the bank? His brother is the CEO of the bank. He is responsible for whatever money is passed to the bank. Mr. Speaker, I want to move on. Mr. Speaker, how much money, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we want to know how much money is going through the hands of the bank. How much money, Mr. Speaker? How much money, Mr. Speaker, is being provided in this program that is going through the Development Bank of St Kitts and Nevis, of which his brother is the CEO? That is what I'm asking, Mr. Speaker. And we need to know. Because you see, Mr. Speaker, this is important to us. An examination of the capital budget, Mr. Speaker, provides even more evidence of the political gimmickry that permeates the entire budget process. If you look at page 4, volume 1 of the capital expenditure, you will see that net lending is estimated at $191.96 million for 2020. But then it drops dramatically by 32% to $130.7 million in 2021, the year after general elections, and then by a further 10% in 2022 to some $117.7 million, Mr. Speaker. And this is why we say this is political manipulation of the budget process and could not be more blatant in this regard. There is no long-term strategy for development in the country. Political projects are timed to influence the elections and are not conceptualized or sequenced with any development objectives. In the first term of office, the government did the identical thing, Mr. Speaker, you would remember. There was a dearth of projects in the first 3 years. Then as elections approach, there is a flurry of activity aimed at getting political projects off the ground. Now, they are planning to do the same thing. Now they are planning to do the same thing again in the very unlikely event that they will return to office. But they have put their plans in black and white in this year's budget. And that is why we say, what recklessness. Such absence of a long-term strategic plan is bound to haunt us as a nation in the future. We must stop it as soon as we can. The people of St Kitts and Nevis want to know whether the Prime Minister continues to hide the IMF report because of a warning it might have been given about the excessive spending by the administration, or the squandermania, as it is being called. So much money is flowing out from the Treasury, but hardly anything is flowing back that is new. Let us take as an example what's taking place at Port Zante with the stalled construction of the second cruise pier. This administration made a huge song and dance about the pier, which is supposed to be the flagship project of the entire 5-year program, 5 years in office. Today, we have a brand new pier, over $160 million being spent on a pier that can't even be used at the moment. The Honorable Member for St. Christopher 1 and Minister of Public Works keeps moving the goalposts as to when the second cruise pier will be handed over and inaugurated. It was supposed to be opened in September the 15th, in time for independence. Then the deadline was moved to October. Then it was moved to November. I would like the Honorable Minister of Public Works to tell us the date for the opening of the second pier. Is it Christmas Day? When? We want to know. The Honorable Member for St. Christopher 1 has been making all kinds of excuses as to why the new pier cannot be opened. He's trying to lay all the blame for the delay at the feet of the contractor. But is it really so? But the Minister of Public Works is responsible for approving all contracts and ensuring that a thorough EIA incorporating all the necessary studies and surveys were properly undertaken. Mr. Speaker, the responsibility should have been, that's by the way, the responsibility for the delayed opening of the second pier must be placed squarely at the feet of the Honorable Minister of Public Works, member for number 1. The minister, he dropped the ball on the second cruise pier. Somebody had to have cut corners in terms of the approval process that led to the construction of the pier, where midway through construction, a massive layer of bedrock was suddenly discovered. This was the minister's responsibility, and had he had the competence to do the job properly, need I say, the integrity to do his job properly, there is no way that such a massive layer of solid rock could have taken them by surprise halfway through the construction of the pier. The slab of rock would have been detected from the very beginning if a proper bathymetric survey was done. That would have allowed the contractor to factor it into the design plan of the second cruise pier. We would not be faced with a situation where the pier is now complete after almost doubling the cost. And it cannot be used because the water is not deep enough to accommodate the very largest cruise ships, which was the whole point to constructing the second cruise pier in the first place. Mr. Speaker, somebody must have cut corners. Someone did not enforce the rules of the Development Control and Planning Board. And today, I would posit that full responsibility for this lies at the feet of the Minister of Works. Cutting corners and suspending the rules has been his modus operandi since taking office.
Mr. Speaker,
we only have to look at the proposed plans for the construction
on a point of order, Mr. Speaker,
of the Bastia High School.
For number 1, maybe it's not wise for me to attempt to predict what your point would be, but it's so. But let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite obviously has come to this house to continue on his campaign of lies and rumors as it relates to the pier, new cruise pier. And Mr. Speaker, in any construction project, right, Mr. Speaker, there are unforeseeable circumstances. And for the record, Mr. Speaker, with
respect, Mr. Speaker, with respect.
For the record,
with respect, Mr. Speaker, I don't want any explanation.
For the record, Mr. Speaker.
He has his time to come. What is the point?
Sit down. Sit down. Mr. Speaker, the member opposite himself raised the point of a design and build. And it is in fact a design and build contract. And the contractor must be responsible for any flaws in any design. And for the record, 99% of the contract has already been paid. Mr. Speaker. And the contractor, JVD, had a non-disclosure agreement. A non-disclosure agreement for over a year with Cashman, who designed the project under their watch, Mr. Speaker. Under their watch, only one. Everybody sit down, please. Sit down. Please distract me, sir. Sit down now. Sit down.
seated
Sit
on the
down,
point
man.
of
Let me
order.
make my point of order.
So, honorable member for number 1, your difficulty is him blaming you for whatever. Yes.
Not only that, Mr. Speaker. Not only that, Mr. Speaker. Not only that, Mr. Speaker. Right? He himself said it's a design and build contract. Right? You understand, Mr. Speaker? So the fact is, he has made false proposition, Mr. Speaker, that a bathymetric survey was not done. A bathymetric survey is a component of the EIA. And a revised EIA was done in July of 2017, which includes a bathymetric survey. So if a bathymetric survey was not done, how on earth we will find out whether the debt was there or not? So he has withdrawn, Mr. Speaker.
I withdrawn. It was done late.
Withdrawn.
It was done late. I agree with you. It was done late.
You must agree with
It
me.
was done late. It was done late.
No.
It was done late.
No, Mr.
I agree with you.
Not at all. Mr. Speaker. Walid.
It was done late.
An EIA was done, for the record, Mr.
It was
Speaker,
done late.
in 2014 when they failed to build the pier. And when we came in 2017, we revised the EIA. It is at the Development Control and Planning Board. Go and get it, Mr. Speaker. You go and get it.
Thank you.
Right.
Continue. That was nothing sounds like. Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point that there is inefficiency and one questions what is really going on here. Why a monumental project like this must end up the way it is? That is the question. $160 million and it's spoiled. That's a lot of money to spoil. Mr. Speaker, that's a lot of money to spoil. What we are saying here, what it is that has gone here. What is it, Mr. Speaker, that has gone wrong here? Why we are having this situation? A whole song and dance about a pier. Oh, it's going to change tourism in St. tourism in St. Kitts. A whole pier build, $160 million spent, and you still can't use the pier. The pier spoiled, they say. Why? Why, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker. Yes, your colleague laughing at you, you know. Your colleague laughing at you. He said, you spoiled the beer. If it is an avocado? Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point very, very seriously that something is amiss here. The people of St. Kitts and Nevis know something is amiss. This is the same minister, before the pier started a company in his own name. Concrete and steel. Mr. Speaker, the pier is built of concrete and steel.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
The pier is built of concrete and steel.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order.
And that is why people out there are asking questions. No wonder something gone wrong with that.
Mr. Speaker.
Something must have been wrong. Tell me, what is it?
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order. The member is trying again with his campaign to cause people to doubt my character. Mr. Speaker, in fact, on the cruise pier, TDC, through masonry products, has procured 12,000 cubic yards of concrete for that pier and 1,200 tons of steel. And he cannot, Mr. Speaker, come to this parliament and try to impugn my character. Right, Mr. Speaker? Right. And he must withdraw it, Mr. Speaker. He must withdraw it.
That is selling steel and cement. Come on.
I agree with the member for number one. I agree with the member for number one that what you have said, you are attempting to impugn his character. Of course, honorable member, please, you said the same member. Honorable member, could I be allowed to complete my statement? You said you was criticizing the honorable member for number one, which you have a right to. I even accept the harshest of criticisms here once they stay within the remit of the decorum. But you continue to say the same member for number one started a company just before the pier started, and he sells concrete and steel. Clearly, honorable, we're not silly in here. It's an inference that you're impugning some. Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter. I am of the view that you are attempting to impugn the character of the member for number one. Please do not do that. Good.
I'm not doing that. I am saying what the facts are. I want to make it very, very clear that I am not surprised that all of this has happened, because people out there are very concerned about all that has gone on, especially when people have been saying that a company has been created. To sell these same products here in St Kitts and Nevis. That's all I'm saying. But I don't know why he's so antsy. I don't know why he's so antsy at all. I mean, I'm not going to say that a guilty conscience, does not need an accuser, because I am not doing that at all. I'm not doing that. Mr. Speaker, I want to make it clear that this is something that the country still wants to hear about. Mr. Speaker, we want to know what is happening with this second cruise pier. We want to know what is it that has gone wrong. Something must have gone wrong, because you can't have a pier costing $160 million and then on one side you can't berth a ship. But what you build it for? That is what we're asking. What you build it for? Money. To create money? To create $160 million of expenditure? So where is this money gone? That is what the question is. Because the pier definitely could not be what it is that we envisaged it to be when you can't use it and $160 million has been spent. Mr. Speaker, this is what is happening. When you see the cost of the pier has been doubled again, you have to look at what really is going on. The cost set out to be first $31.5 million US. Then it went on to $48 million US, Mr. Speaker. With an additional $7 million US is still to be accounted for overruns.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, please, yeah.
Unless the presenter is stating, incorrect figures.
Yes, he is, Mr. Speaker.
No, I am not. No. These are false figures.
It was never $31 million under this government. Okay. Never.
Honorable member for number 6, let's hear it. Now that you have...
The cost of this pier was never... But that's you. You couldn't build the pier.
$31 million. You can't tell me what it was. I am telling you that it was.
We never had any cost discussion about $31 million. Never.
$31.5 million.
That's where the barges went and left you. All the barges went out.
Order. I will hear the point of order.
Mr. Speaker, under this administration, when Casper embarked upon the construction of the pier, there was never any cost in the amount of $31 million. And there has never any cost or doubling of any cost or any cost increase. It has always been, Mr. Speaker, $43 million and $5 million, including the upland development and other things. So the member is talking rubbish, if I can use a language here.
No, you don't need to.
Use a language. Is that,
You
if
need
that's
to
the parliamentary?
describe it as that.
Right.
You've stated your
Fine.
facts
Yeah.
as you know them. Continue.
That is due. Same here.
It was, same Pier, 31.5 million US dollars. They came into office. They came into office. It went up to $48 million US. Now, Mr. Speaker, with an additional $7 million, it is going to cost us 55 million US dollars. Those are facts, Mr. Speaker. By the time you add the cost of the additional dredging and the blasting of that rock, and you take care of the spoilage that has taken place, it will cost you 60 million US dollars.
Speaker, the records must reflect in this house. The $31 million you referred to could not build the pier. That is why the barges left here. He brought the barges to St Kitts and they left. They left overnight. How could $31 million build a pier?
$1.5 million.
That's why it was not built.
Taking up my
You couldn't
time
build it.
unnecessarily.
You couldn't build the pier.
Taking up my time
You
unnecessarily.
couldn't build the pier.
Sit down.
That's why they left.
Sit down.
Couldn't build the pier.
Right.
Right.
Sit
For
down.
$31 million.
And Mr. Speaker, some experts have even said that when you factor in the interest that will have to be paid on the loans to construct the pier, the cost can go as high as US $100 million or over 270 million EC dollars, Mr. Speaker. And this is ridiculous. Mr. Speaker, the National Bank, which is one of the contributors to this loan, is in the hole for this particular pier. As I have said earlier, our National Bank is already facing crisis because of the high number of non-performing loans. Our Social Security Board has invested US $7 million.
Member is
And
being
our
reckless, Mr.
SIDF
Speaker.
fund has committed $5 million.
Mr. Speaker, the member is being reckless. Mr. Speaker, the National Bank and the group of companies that provided the funding for the pier have a representation on the Progress Committee in the person of a project engineer, Mr. Errol Douglas. So to say that the bank is in a hole, he is being frivolous, he's being malicious, Mr. Speaker. That engineer on the pier approves all the claims, Mr. Speaker. Approves all the claims. Yes.
I just see it as a criticism and opinion.
It's malicious. It's
And
malicious. The bank is in the
continue.
hole. The project is in the hole. It's malicious.
As I was saying,
The FT Williams project was in the hole. That was doubled.
Order.
Also, if you look at what is happening, as I mentioned before with the Social Security Board, it has invested US $7 million. And our SIDF fund has committed $5 million US dollars. How will these financial institutions be repaid if the pair does not bring the development dividends that were originally envisaged? And again, where is all the extra money going to come from to meet these cost overruns? Mr. Speaker, we have also learned, after we examined the Ministry of Tourism's own projections for 2019, that even if the pier is able to open sometime before the end of the cruise season, that it would have accommodated less ships and less passengers. The projections for 2019 are down by almost 300,000 cruise passengers. And now we understand that about 20 cruise ships have pulled St Kitts and Nevis from their itineraries due to an incident that took place recently at Port Zante. Mr. Speaker, this means that the 2019 cruise season will bring less passengers and less ships to our shores, when this coalition administration has already overspent to build a brand spanking new pier that is completely useless at the moment. In addition to all of this, the second cruise pier that will have no new terminal or even a place for taxis to park because none of this was factored into the cost. All of the bungling taking place, Mr. Speaker, by the incompetence of those who are responsible, especially in the ministry, and also in the ministries, is having a serious impact on the livelihoods of our service providers, our taxi operators, our tour operators, our hair braiders, our craftspeople, our entertainers, our vendors, retailers, and restaurateurs. Mr. Speaker, right now our taxi drivers are crying out because ever since this coalition government has taken office, they have flooded the market with an excessive number of new taxi providers. Right now we have over 500 taxi drivers competing for the business of the less than 300 to 500 cruise passengers who do not arrive for pre-booked tours. We have ministers in government who we understand are owning companies that compete directly with these taxi drivers. Our taxi drivers are hurting. Some of them are just getting 1 or 2 jobs after a whole week of lining up and waiting for work. They are saying that if they walk away with US $40 a week, they are walking away with a lot of money. Competition is very stiff, Mr. Speaker, at the Pier. And many of the new larger scale tour operators are now taking over that small market to the detriment of the small man. How can the Minister for Public Works and Minister of Tourism go on record calling themselves friends of the taxi drivers, those who serve the cruise industry directly and indirectly? This, we believe, is hypocritical. The bungling and incompetence of the Minister of Public Works and the Minister of Tourism is almost single-handedly destroying our tourism industry. The former Labour administration worked very hard to build up our cruise industry from scratch, to the point where by 2014, we were already receiving over 700,000 passengers and set it on a path to break records in the region. St Kitts and Nevis, it is going backward by this government. But, Mr. Speaker, this quantumania does not even stop with the second cruise Pier fiasco. Since the taking office, the Harris-led administration has been only focused on several overpriced capital projects that are not only wasting taxpayers' money, but are designed to put money in the hands of cronies and friends, and even some government ministers who may have started their own, their own companies. Mr. Speaker, now that the elections are approaching, we are seeing a frenzy of small projects with big budgets being started, some of which were not included in the appropriation bill for 2019. These projects are not doing much good for the people. For example, we have already mentioned the cruise Pier, the Old Road Bay project. Will it yield any benefit to our people? $31.8 million, Mr. Speaker. We have an overpriced East Bastion bus terminal, $3 million. We have a new national park, National Heroes Park, $4 million, Mr. Speaker. The Patch-up Road resurfacing project, $69 million, Mr. Speaker. Yes. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it is now going to cost $69 million. Now we are hearing that $22 million, so again, where has the rest of the money gone? There is also $700,000 budgeted for renovations at government headquarters, when the only change has been the recommissioning of the lift into an elevator. Where really is the money, Mr. Speaker? All of these projects are costing in the millions of dollars. Nothing is costing thousands anymore. Mr. Speaker, the details of the capital budget also reflect the absence of a strategic plan and the assignment of unduly high priority to showy projects at the expense of projects with greater developmental impact. We see, Mr. Speaker, in the capital budget, for example, monies which are committed to the upgrade of Government House, the construction, Mr. Speaker, of new Parliament building, the renovation, Mr. Speaker, of government headquarters, and a number of similar projects which may be useful, but which must be balanced with a comprehensive array of projects aimed at transforming our economy over the long term. Mr. Speaker, I want to make it clear that this handful of capital projects will not do the job for our people in 2020. We believe that there has been no new major foreign direct investment since the coalition government has taken office. The sixth census project has gone to Grenada, and there has been no word of the Ritz-Carlton and the underwater hotel that we were promised here by the Minister of Tourism. Where the hell has that gone? The only thing that new that has been seen is a groundbreaking ceremony for a hotel to be built in Keon, directly opposite Windsor University, a large building. It will in fact accommodate, it would appear, thousands of students. What competition is going to take place among our own residents in Keon, in Otleys, in Lodge, people who have invested large sums of money to upgrade their own buildings, providing dorms for students, but now a large building, thousands, it would appear, of rooms, down there, Mr. Speaker, at Windsor. Down there at Windsor. And we are wondering what benefits will it bring to the people in Keon, the people in that area who have invested thousands upon thousands of dollars to improve their property to accommodate the students who would be there. Now, a large building, which they call a hotel, we know it is not a hotel. It's dorms for students. Why? Why is this being done? 5-star dorms, he said. You hear the minister himself. 5-star dorms. You hear the representative himself boasting that it is a 5-star dorms that is being built there to compete with his own people in Keon, who have incurred tremendous costs improving their homes, to improve their livelihoods. And he has brought, he said, a 5-star dorm to compete with them. His own words. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that when you compare what we did when we were in office, look at what we did. We have always put people first. We in the Labour Party have always put the people of this country first. I am very conscious that as the leader of the new next-gen SKN Labour administration, I can do a much better job at turning the economy and society around and take our country to the next level, preparing our country, Mr. Speaker, for the next-gen SKN country that we are trying to build. Mr. Speaker, I will therefore now turn to a number of initiatives which we believe will bring a new sense of preparedness that will bring our people properly into the year 2020. The new next-gen SKN Labour administration, it will stimulate and revitalize the economy. We will bring family-sustaining jobs back to our country. We will bring real investment back to our country, not student dorms masquerading as hotels, but rather no less than 2 exclusive luxury resorts, no less than 2 new factories as well, Mr. Speaker. We of the next-gen SKN Labour Party, we will invest in growth-enhancing capital investment, such as the building of the bridge to Nevis. We will be building a cross-country highway directly connecting West Bastille to Whitegate in St. Paul's. Various urban revitalization projects. We will be modernizing. Right. Okay. We will be modernizing all schools, to name a few. All schools, Mr. Speaker, will be remodeled and modernized. We of the next gen, St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party, we will do so using local contractors and small businesses, as we have always done. Many of our small contractors are hurting hurting under unity because they are not being paid. The same practice that the IMF warned when our minister was finance minister, the minister who is now prime minister. They warned us that he was starving the payment of small businessmen in order to have a surplus. We will not do that. The small business people, they will be paid as they provide services and goods to our people, Mr. Speaker.
I mean, he's doing his swan dance, it's the last dance, so I'll allow you to finish.
Investment back,
I'll allow you to
Mr.
go to your
Speaker.
barrel.
We will explore new industries. We shall explore new industries, such as the medical marijuana industry, and create in new industries for the benefit of our people. We will create the first 100 millionaires for our people local and those who are in fact in the diaspora. That is what we will do. That is the next gen promise and commitment we are making. Mr. Speaker, we will revolutionize the agriculture and fisheries industries by giving our farmers and fishermen all the support and incentives that we have given to stimulate tourism in the past. We have done it before, and we shall do it again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party can take take cognizance of exactly what we have done when we were in office before. We have an excellent record with regard to the economy. In fact, every progressive step that our country has ever made been taken under the Labour administration. The 2020 vision of the next-gen SKN Labour administration, it is designed to take our country yet again to an even higher level, Mr. Speaker. At the center of our vision is our deep and abiding commitment to do all the good that we can do and put the people first in our beloved country, Mr. Speaker. That is why today, Mr. Speaker, I want to turn specifically to look at what would be in a new appropriation bill 2020. We will make sure, Mr. Speaker, that a new Labour administration will do the following. We will allow one duty-free vehicle for every single adult over the age of 18 years. A new Labour administration will allow one duty-free vehicle.
I think the honourable presenter is at a stage where it's important for us to hear what he is saying at this point. He's now speaking of very specific proposals. I think in all honourable members, in all fairness, honourable members, in all fairness to us here and those who are following us in the media or through the media, for us to hear clearly what the presenter is saying.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, using the Appropriation Bill 2020 debate to provide our people with a glimpse of what the next-gen SKN budget and priorities would look like that would come into effect the minute that we take office. Our people have told us that their main priorities are in the areas of taxation, one, education, housing, employment, and climate change. And now, as you said, let me read specifically what these commitments are. With regard to tax reform, we would put money in the pockets of our citizens and ease their burdens in areas that have been quite excessive. One, a new Labour administration will allow one duty-free vehicle for every single adult over the age of 18 years. We believe that duty-free vehicles must not only be for ministers, permanent secretaries, and certain selected people. Every single adult should have access to at least one duty-free vehicle, Mr. Speaker. Traditionally, duty-free vehicles are automatically provided to government ministers, senior civil servants. We want to go beyond that. We want to make sure that every citizen, every resident is able to access at least one duty-free vehicle in his lifetime. Number two, a new Labour administration will extend the full discounted VAT day package, not just at Christmas, as is being done now, but will do so 3 times a year. Easter time, summertime, and Christmas time. The days are aimed to alleviate the hardships felt by our single mothers and large families, to accommodate back-to-school shopping, with spin-off effects on stimulating our small businesses and large retailers, Mr. Speaker. The package will be designed as follows. Discounted VAT rate days, 3 times a year, where all VAT-registered businesses are allowed to charge VAT at a rate of 5% on the sale of goods only, and all tangible items that are presently subject to 17% VAT qualify for the discounted VAT rate, Mr. Speaker. For vehicle purchases, VAT will be exempt on the first $50,000, with VAT at the standard 70% charge thereafter. Barrels or e-container or decontainers, as they call them, of foodstuff up to 400 pounds in weight will be allowed free of duty and taxes. Let me say it again. 400 pounds in weight will be allowed free of duty and taxes. And travelers and non-commercial importers will receive a duty-free allowance of EC $540 or US $200 off the cost, the insurance and freight, that is the CIF value of our goods. Number 3, all VAT on taxes will be eliminated. All VAT on taxes, I want to repeat that. All VAT on taxes will be eliminated. We will no longer tax our taxes. Number 4, VAT will be reduced from 17% to 13%. VAT on the labor will be reduced from 17% to 13%. When we introduced the VAT in 2011, it was for a period of time only. He knew that. He knew that. And he has not removed it. We will come back next year, 2020, and we shall remove, we will review the VAT from 17% to 13%, Mr. Speaker. Number 5, a new Labour administration will implement a start from zero tax package to stimulate our small businesses that will include 1, duty-free vehicle for all small business startups. Let me repeat that for the young businessmen who are listening. Duty-free vehicle for all small business startups, Mr. Speaker. Duty-free on all equipment and furniture for all startups within the first year until the business is fully operationalized. We will start from zero hassle, zero duty, zero application or application fees. No longer will our small entrepreneurs have to endure the hassle to receive these benefits. This would be an entitlement, Mr. Speaker. And so we shall establish a ministry of small enterprise or small businesses, similar to the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. A new Ministry of Small Enterprise, a new Ministry of, just as we have a Ministry of Consumer Affairs. And this new ministry will be created to give small businesses a voice and equip them with all the tools necessary to survive and thrive in a competitive environment. Presently, our large businesses have representation to the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Our government will be the champion of our small businesses when we take office in 2020. We will review the unincorporated small business tax by increasing, Mr. Speaker, the tax-exempt threshold. Presently, it is $6,000 per quarter. We will increase it to $12,000 per quarter for all service providers. And those who are as retailers, which is presently $37,500, we will increase their threshold, threshold from $37,500 to $50,000. Only above that, they will be able to pay tax. Only above that, they will be able to pay tax. Right now, Mr. Speaker, most of them then will pay no tax at all. Number 6, a new labor administration will make automatic to all registered and producing farmers and fishermen a duty-free concession on seeds, agriculture inputs, vehicles, boats, insecticides, pesticides, tools, agricultural implements, and entitlement. This will no longer be provided on a discretionary basis. That is how it is. People tell us that they are bona fide agricultural people. They can't get it because it is being done by favoritism. We will bring that to an end, Mr. Speaker. We will also reintroduce our small grant scheme for our farmers. Mr. Speaker, right, this coalition administration, under the leadership of the Minister of Agriculture, has virtually destroyed farming here in St Kitts and Nevis. Our aim is to stimulate a second agriculture revolution that would guarantee food security here in St Kitts and Nevis and stimulate the production of value-added commodities such as beverages, tonics, soaps, candles, as part of the new health and wellness industry. Number 7, soon finished, Mr. Speaker. A new labor administration will construct 2,000 modern affordable homes that will accommodate all the latest appliances and will be powered by solar panels, Mr. Speaker. Powered by solar panels. Number 8, in an effort to provide assistance to our middle class, as well as those in the lower income brackets, we will offer diversified housing solutions using NHC as a coordinator, working with private contractors to build as well as finance construction on land already owned. We will establish a special unit in the NHC to assist middle income earners directly, especially our graduates who are having it difficult to have their homes. We will have a special unit in NHC to look after them with regard to providing them with their own commitments to home. We will offer diversified housing solutions to meet people where they are. This will be specifically targeted to our young men who wish to use their own labor to enhance the family compound and or acquire their own property by providing them with the necessary bundle of building materials. Number 10, all essential service personnel, such as our police, our defense force, our firemen and firewomen, our nurses and sanitation officers will receive an appropriate housing allowance, Mr. Speaker. They of the essential services will be provided a special housing allowance. I know they have a few more days before they go. They may try to do it, but we will do it, Mr. Speaker, because they do not know exactly how to do it. Mr. Speaker, I want to repeat that all essential service personnel, such as our police, our defense force, our firemen and firewomen, our nurses and sanitation officers will receive a housing allowance from the new Labour Next Gen administration. Number 11, in the area of education, a new Labour administration will, 1, extend universal free education to the tertiary level. We did it for the primary and secondary level. We will now extend it, Mr. Speaker, to the tertiary level as well. We did it before and we will do it again. There will be no tuition to attend the CFBC. No tuition to attend the CFBC. No tuition to attend the CFBC. Comprehensive tertiary level education will now be extended to them. We will construct a new advanced level college in Nevis. There's need for a new campus of the CFBC in Nevis. We shall construct that. We shall construct that. Fair share, a new campus of the CFBC will be in Nevis. Mr. Speaker, every student wishing to pursue undergraduate or graduate studies in a field necessary to national development will receive a grant of no less than 25,000 EC dollars. Let me repeat that. Every student wishing to pursue undergraduate or graduate studies in a field necessary to national development will receive a grant of EC $25,000. Mr. Speaker, continuing, the interest rate, listen to me, just listen. Shut up and listen. The interest rate on student loans at the Development Bank will be reduced immediately from 9% to 5%, Mr. Speaker. That's what we will do. Labour did it before. We shall do it again. We will provide debt relief to reduce the burden of student loans. All primary and secondary schools will be upgraded and modernized to offer the best quality teaching and learning experience. We will build a brand new Bastia High School, state-of-the-art, at the Victoria Road location. Nothing on the aquifer. I give you that commitment. I give the people of Bastia a commitment. Nothing on the aquifer for a new Bastia High School. We will go back to the original site at the Victoria Road. We will introduce a maintenance policy for all schools to ensure that the present mold crisis never ever happens again, Mr. Speaker. Number 12, in the area of health, a new next-gen SKN Labour administration will construct a brand new high-tech Joseph N. France General Hospital. After all, install an MRI machine right there at the hospital. A new CT scan right there at the hospital. Nobody have to go and lie down when a monkey lie down. We will do it right there in our hospital and increase the number of life-saving equipment, including 1 mobile unit at our hospital and health centers. We will reintroduce the stipend to incentivize our student nurses. After all, they have nobody now in the nursing division at the college. Why? The stipend which they were given, taken away. Nonsense. We will reintroduce the stipend to incentivize our student nurses so that they can earn as they learn. We will provide scholarships and training opportunities. Yes.
I do not want to interrupt you in your stride, but that 2.5 hour time period has just expired. I'm aware of interruptions and so on. I'll give you 6 minutes. 6.
One time the interruption was 15 minutes. One time.
What about 10 minutes, sir?
Remember, I'll reconsider. 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
So I was saying that we will reintroduce the stipend to incentivize our student nurses so that they can earn as they learn. We will provide scholarships and training opportunities for specialized nurses and doctors, Mr. Speaker. We will introduce a national cancer control policy that will give cancer the same focus and resources that was given to HIV/AIDS and that which is now being given to chronic non-communicable diseases. We will do it. We did it before and we will do it again, Mr. Speaker. We will introduce a comprehensive universal health care package, something that we left to be done 5 years. They can't do it up to now. We have to come back next year and do it after 5 years, and we shall do it, Mr. Speaker. 13, in the area of climate change adaptation and mitigation, a new next-gen SKN Labour Administration will introduce a buyback tariff where a direct cash rebate will be provided to households which invest in renewable energy for excess energy sold to the grid. We will use tax policy to encourage persons to go green, solar panels, energy efficient bulbs, smart meters. We would want to make sure that there are special duty reduction on smart cars, isn't it? Electric cars. We want to make sure that these are part and parcel of our thrust to get a green country, Mr. Speaker. We will implement a ban on single-use plastics. We will explore various renewable energy projects that would allow the government to reduce its expenditure and dependence on fossil fuel. All government buildings will be fitted with solar panels to encourage energy efficiency. Mr. Speaker, this is going to take place here in St Kitts and Nevis. Mr. Speaker, this is just a taste of our next-gen SKN economic plan for the people of St Kitts and Nevis. Yesterday I listened. Nothing that speaks to our future. Nothing whatsoever, Mr. Speaker. No vision. 2020 is an iconic year. Where do we go? We can't go with the same old thing that we are having now. Nepotism, corruption. 5 years were given to them. They used the 5 years to enrich themselves and their families. It is time for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis to get something. That is why we say people first here in the next-gen economic policy for St. Kitts and Nevis. It is a 2020 vision that will put people first, because national development is all about people. It will put people right where they belong, at the very center of development planning, because there can be no progress without people. Mr. Speaker, our next-gen plans for St. Kitts and Nevis is not just a mishmash of capital projects like fixing up the governor's residence and renovating government buildings. Our next-gen plans will address the high cost of living and put savings in the pockets of our people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Our plans will have something in it for everyone. This coalition administration is not really concerned about helping the small man. They are not concerned about narrowing the gap between the rich and poor and expanding our middle class. We are committed to do that, Mr. Speaker. They are not concerned about sustainability. Under the leadership of the Honorable Timothy Harris, our beloved federation is going backward. But we in the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party have the track record of progress and success, as well as the plans and the ideas to take this country forward. The next gen, look at them, some of them are there in the gallery, the next gen team that will take our new government forward. Mr. Speaker, today, I want the people of St Kitts and Nevis to know that hope is on the way. Opportunity is on the way. Relief is on the way. The next Gen SKN Labour Party is the only party with the competence, the compassion, and the commitment to give the people of St. Kitts and Nevis the future that they deserve, and help every man, woman, and child to realize their dreams, to realize their aspirations for themselves, for their families, and for their country. God, I believe, has preserved me to be able to work with this new team. I am here to lead them into the future. I have done my part, and I will continue to do what they have asked me to do and what God has preserved me so to do. St. Kitts and Nevis cannot afford another 5 years of this selfish, uncaring, neglectful, incompetent, and corrupt coalition administration. The future of St. Kitts and Nevis can only be secured with Labour. God bless you. Thank you, my dear people.